I see these huge salaries, and I see salaries is eating up all of the profit. And it's like, how can we grow a company when I don't even see a savings account? How do you secure a purchasing decision if you don't have any savings? How do you secure a hiring decision if you don't have a savings? So it's a lot of things that go into understanding where the company is from a revenue standpoint, where they want to go from a growth standpoint. And I like to make it clear how all these things, affect one another.
So welcome to the podcast today. I'm super excited. We have Tim Wingate with us. Welcome, Tim.
Hey, pleasure to be here, Brad. I love the fact that I'm just here on this podcast with you.
Well, I know I mentioned this to you, but I was super excited to have you on. I think this is one of those episodes where I get real amped up to have the guest on. I know you have a ton of information. It's super valuable stuff that all of us need.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to take any other time. We got to get going. So Tim, he is a construction accountant with G+F Business and Financial Consulting. So maybe let me ask you this, because a big thing for any company to be successful is the money, right? The financial and understanding, the accounting side, we can get in a lot of trouble. And construction is very unique because we have WIP, work in progress. It can really create challenges for us as we're forecasting incorrectly. We could pay more taxes, pay too little taxes. So maybe we start with this. When you think about construction accounting, how does that differ from traditional accounting?
I mean, it's very, very different, being that we, first of all, need to understand managerial accounting. And a form of that is job cost accounting, of course. And so we need to understand, okay, this is what's happening out there in the field. Now, how do we understand that in the back office? And then what does it say, to me as the accountant, and also to the owner, who may be the GC or the contractor. And so we need to kind of like reading a book and understanding, like, what's the story? What's the storyline? And so that's what a construction accountant does. We come in and we're just not doing the book just to get the taxes done. No, we need to understand, like, how profitable the projects are. Are you generating the right margins to make sure that we have enough to take care of or I should say, meet the desired operating margin. And that's like a term I kind of use. There's no really, school term for that. But because I think every industry, every business is going to have a different desired operating profit margin.
So let me ask you about that real quick. So, I mean, maybe before we get into the desired operating margin, this maybe have to do, especially with the fee business, right? Which many of us are in construction or interior design or architecture. Maybe before that, when you start thinking about, as you mentioned, managerial accounting and job costing, how important is it for any of your customers to understand ideally what their profit margin should be? And this is essentially what you're saying. They have to have a desired outcome, to have a goal, right? Because this will allow you correctly to job cost the job as you're tracking hours, to understand WIP, right? The work in progress you mentioned. How important is understanding that end goal and then setting up the contract? And then the biggest thing we deal with in construction is durations, right? We may have a guesstimated profit margin of X in 16 months, but the project takes 20 months. So that's going to completely change, percentage, profit, tax, all those things along with it.
Yeah. So what we need to first look at it, and let me make sure, because it was kind of a loaded question, so I want to make sure everything. So what was the first part?
So essentially the first part is how important, maybe we look at the overall context. How important is it to really dive in? And I know we'll get into KPIs, but should you understand the goal profit margin from the beginning? And then how do you, overlay that with the timeline of the project?
Perfect. Yeah. So when I look at, there's two different profit margins. Okay. We're dealing with project profit margins, and then we're also dealing with the company's profit margin. And so we need to start with the company's profit margin and understand, where is it you want to take the company. I can't come into your business if you don't understand where the company is going and where you want to take the company, because your profit margin should kind of cater to that. And what I mean is, hey, if you want to be a $50 million construction company, then, we can't have profit margins of maybe, 3 or 4% if you're in the residential market, so, or you can't not, you can't be taking huge salaries if you're trying to generate enough profit to save money for the company for its future growth. So those are big things, that big numbers that you need to understand. And so that's where I like to focus on with owners, is saying, hey, where are you going? Where's the vision? Because we need to make sure that our desired operating profit margin caters to that vision. And so that's the first thing.
So I guess to just reiterate what you're saying is, Timothy, what's really important is that, and I think a lot of people miss it. It's on a job project, right? On a project margin, and we'll break
Hmm.
this down later. But let's say on this job I make 18%. Okay, that's fine. This job I make 14. This one's 16. But
Hmm.
that's not taken in. That's only job costing that job specifically. When you take into, as you mentioned, overhead, rent, if you're not job costing your vehicles or computers or phones or whatever it is, you may make that on the job, but you could be netting 2% as a company. I mean, it could be 1%. It could be negative. I mean, it could be whatever that is. But essentially, what's
Yeah.
interesting, and maybe this even speaks to your end goal, I would imagine that the reason you want to understand the company's company margin or the company gross and net revenue goals is because, let's say my company, for example, I'm not selling, but
Hmm.
let's say that if I was preparing my company for sale over the next 3 years, I might be very cautious on extra expenditures, as you mentioned, salary, because I want to the margins look really good, because that X factor, when I sell, it's going to be even better, that multiplier, if I'm watching these percentage. So essentially you're working with clients to understand what is your end goal with the company, and maybe, so that you have cash to capitalize and build from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because most times when I get into the company, the first thing that I see that's going wrong is I say that the owner is stealing from the company. you know, I see these huge salaries, and I see salaries is eating up all of the profit. And it's like, what are we doing? How can we grow a company when I don't even see a savings account? Like, what are you allocating towards saving? What are you allocating towards company growth? How do you even secure a purchasing decision if you don't have any savings? How do you secure a hiring decision if you don't have a savings? So it's a lot of things that go into understanding where the company is from a revenue standpoint, where they want to go from a growth standpoint, and just how all those things marry. And I like to make it clear and get the owner to understand how all these things marry together and how they affect one another. If
That makes complete
so.
sense. Maybe expound on this, because what's interesting is one comment that I picked up on, you just mentioned. You said, and you used the term ceiling, which is kind of funny, but essentially their salary's so big that it's really hurting the company from growth. But you mentioned
Yes.
savings for hiring or
Hmm.
PTO, maybe even PTO, expend it, the cost that people don't understand, the PTO, that you have to have cash on hand, right? So
Yeah.
maybe walk through those examples of why you need dollars as you hire. You need dollars for PTO as you grow, why you need that revenue on hand.
Yeah, so first thing we need to understand is we need to understand that labor burden is a real thing, and it's something for us to really focus on. And every person in your company costs you more than what you've offered them. And so that's what every business owner needs to first understand, is how much does this person cost me? You know, and get down to, the sense of that. And so, because if you're buying new software, let's say for instance, and this software requires 4 or 5 users. Now those users cost you money because each user has an expense that needs to be factored into the labor burden. So that way you understand that, hey, when I hire this new person, I got to give them user access to this new system. So it's going to cost me, it's going to up my subscription by another $15, $20. So now I got to add that into their labor burden rate. If I'm going to offer PTO and give everybody, 5 more days this year, what is that going to do to their labor burden? Workers' comp is changing, it's going up. What is that doing? I want to offer 401k this year. What is that doing? So all these things need to be factored in. So understanding labor burden for every employee in your company, regardless they work in the field or out off the field, they need to have a labor burden rate calculated for them.
So maybe without calling out any of your clients to put you on the spot, I know that any good financial operator that if you looked at him, Tim, and you said, "Okay, Brad, what is
Mhm,
your labor burden?" Right, and they should be able to know to a calculation depending on the position that X factor. And for example, let's say if it's you're paying someone $100,000 salary for easy math, that labor
mhm.
burden could be 145,000, could be 156, maybe
Yeah.
163. As you mentioned, when you start thinking about 401k, when you start thinking about match and health insurance, and software is a great example. All these little, a truck, a company cell phone, a computer.
Mhm.
How many of the clients that you work with could tell you on the spot what their labor burden is?
0. And it's not to shame any of my clients because they know it now,
Yeah.
and those who we are onboarding, we understand that we're gonna get there. But but most of these guys, they just don't know these things. And I don't know if it's being taught inside, the construction licensing course
Oh,
or
they're not teaching you this stuff. There ain't no. I'm telling you, they're not. You got to. It's school of the hard knocks, right? We got to figure
I
this
hear
out
you.
as we go through it. So, how valuable is that? Like, why, as you start with labor burden, how can that impact the success of a company?
Yeah, because that's when the numbers get really real. And the contractor realizes, man, I need to slow down on how much of I'm spending. Maybe that new truck that I wanted, I can just hold back from getting that today. They it just puts a pause on a lot of things, and I think that's a healthy pause to have, especially for contracts, because sometimes we get excited when we land those big contracts and they finish, and we collect those big checks, $80,000, $20,000, and then sometimes like, okay, now all of a sudden we can go out and do some big things that we've been wanting to do. And that's where goal setting in the beginning and talking about the company vision, growth, where they want to go as far as growth, all that stuff needs to now line back up to what we want to do with this money, and also what's the best use of it right now. Is it to hire this new employee, or is it not? Can we afford to give them a raise right now? Those things like that, because sometimes you may feel like it's a good thing to do right now, or I need to these guys been working with me for 20 years, because sometimes I'm coming to companies that's been around for 20 years, and they say these guys have been working with me for 20 years. So it's time for them to have a raise now. Well, right now your profit margins and things like that doesn't support it. And so confidently I can tell you that it's not time right now. But what we can do, we can work towards things and set things up so that way we can maybe do this next year or the year after. And I think that's crucial, is setting a baseline, saying this is our baseline, this is where we are now, where are we going, and let's plan for it now. I always tell people, this is like a tax thing. When we do it, when we're in tax season is not the time to tax plan. It's a time to actually just prepare the taxes. Whatever
Right.
has happened has happened. It's not much we can do to change that. And so when we're in the beginning of the year, that's the time to plan for what we want to carry out for the rest of the year, and what we want to carry out for the years to come with the company. So that way we can start to build these things out. And it just allows the people to slow down, like just slow down and talk about it, run it by your accountant, run it by your team, get some feedback, and that way we can make sound decisions. I'm all about that.
See, this is why from the very first question I asked you, the difference between general accounting or like normal accounting as opposed to construction, you have to have an expert such as yourself, Tim,
Yeah.
that really understands this. Because how many times, and the reason I asked about the burden rate, because I've heard from many contractors over the years that, the bigger the company, more people doesn't always mean more money or more, or less stress, right? Because a lot of times they're like, I just had more people, more burden, and I just wasn't making any money, because essentially when you get down to the core of it, it's breaking this labor rate down. How
Yeah.
important is it for you when you're working with your One is, of course, educating them on the burden rate so they can understand and answer that, as you mentioned, after
Hmm.
they're working with you. But how important is it to just, as you think about the overall company, right? Marketing budgets, travel, continuing
Hmm.
education, these things all play a role as you talk about giving a raise, bonuses. I mean, there's things you can do to accrue in January. So instead of going to December and saying, how much money did we make? Well, maybe we start accruing a percentage or something in January so that, right? So
Yeah,
that by the end of the year, we can actually do something for our employees and we've actually planned for it.
absolutely, absolutely. It's very important to do those things, and I hope this is answering your question, but we got to stop making just rash decisions and very fast decisions. And sometimes that's very hard to do. And I know I've mentioned this so many times because my dad is a contractor, so this is where I understand, and they're just used to making these quick decisions because they're used to being in the field. I got to make a fast decision, because the supplies haven't gotten here on time or this hasn't gotten here, but you don't make the same decisions when it comes to the company and its future and what you want to see come from it. So we got to just slow things down and just plan and save. I gotta drive that home. We gotta save money. If you're not saving money, that should be a big red flag. If you can't save money, that should be a big red flag.
So let me ask this, because this could be a mental aspect that probably really challenges you, Timothy, with your clients, is that when you're working with a client and, we understand that as a business owner, you're taking a lot of risks, there's a lot of stress, you're working a lot of hours, right? You're building the business. So there may be some business owners that think, "Hey, I deserve this," or "I'm entitled to this salary."
Hmm.
How do you address that concern with working with someone to show them the benefit of saving, or at least position their company where they have dollars to save, that it could benefit in the long term if they can just understand in the short term?
Sometimes I look at my role as sometimes being a therapist, you know, because sometimes I gotta sit them down and just say, hey, let's take a look at this. First, let's clean up your book so that way we can understand where you are. Because sometimes they can't even see that, or they haven't seen it in years. So let's understand that, and then I let the numbers do the talking. So I'm big on, hey, we can map out you taking $150,000 salary. Let's map that out. Let's see what happens to the profit. Let's see, can you save any money? Oh, you can't. Oh, you only left with $100 at the end of the month, every month for the next 12 months. That's only $1,200. What are you going to do with that? What can you do with that? If an emergency comes up, how are you going to respond? And a lot of times they respond with tapping into a loan or a line of credit or these type of things. And that's a big no-no. You know, when you're trying to grow a company and when you're in the hot seat. When you're in the hot seat, that means you need to change some other things. That means you need to cut back on expenses. You need to probably do some better with your sales, take a look at your marketing, take a look at how your schedules are running. Are you meeting schedule on the job sites? It's just a lot of little things that you need to kind of tighten up on before you start just tapping into, a loan or a line of credit, which so many, some of them and the guys I meet with, that's what they do first.
That's interesting. Would you recommend, because you mentioned that cash, I mean, essentially cash is king, right? Ideally, they're saving, or they should be in a position where they're saving money.
Hmm.
Um, do you recommend that the contractors, as a backup plan, maybe they're not using the line of credit, but at least they have a relationship with the bank? How important is that banking relationship for any business? Especially in a cash flow company that we're in, where labor's high and you're waiting on deposits at times, and cash. It could be a tough thing to hit that payroll every Friday.
Yeah, so a line of credit should be tapped into, and it's very strategic to have a line of credit. I recommend that all my companies have a line of credit, but it's there when you know the money's coming. Yeah, I want to drive that home. It's there to use when you know the money is coming. It's meaning that they approve that payment, that pay app. It's going to take 30 days to get here. And so now I'm just going to tap into this line of credit and use that once the pay app gets here and gets in my bank, then I'm going to pay that line of credit back down. That's what we should use it for. Now, when we talk about being credit worthy to a bank, take care of your personal. If your personal is jacked up, the bank is going to hurt you on a loan application. If the business not showing any profits, that's going to hurt you on a loan application. If the tax returns don't match the P&L and balance sheet, it's going to hurt you on a on a loan application.
Right.
So these are a lot of things that needs to line up. And I'm big on, I don't even prepare taxes for people who don't even have, accounting software. I won't even take you on as a client because I know how important it is to have those things in line. And when we're talking about growth and we talk about things that you want to accomplish, usually a line of credit or a loan is one of them, one of those things that you want to get. And you got to have these things in line. And I get so many people that come to me, I just need you to prepare my taxes. Well, where's your books? Oh, I usually just hand, my guy all my bank statements. Nah, that's not me. I can't take you on. Sorry. I can take you on if you're going to give us the books. We're going to clean them up so that way the books match the tax return. And then we go from there and start to make improvements from there. But that's step one.
Yeah, step one. I mean, so essentially you're not so much like, hey, you have to use a certain accounting software, but you better at least be job costing and tracking so you can come in and essentially clean it up or educate, and consult and be successful because you want to be successful in your line of work. And if they're not at least working towards that, it's going to be an impossible task for you to meet that expectation.
Very impossible and frustrating for me and the client.
So let me ask you this. What are two things that construction owners should understand about their business?
The two things they should understand is, number one, they should understand how to estimate, because you lose a ton of money doing the estimation process. And there's a lot of guys out there who have, sizable companies, but they don't know how to estimate. And they're doing big jobs, but very small margins. They're stressed out, working a lot of hours, those type of things, because they just don't do well with estimating. The other thing is, and it's amazing, some of these things are like kind of non-accountant related, but needs to understand the critical path of a schedule, because getting the schedule complete on time is so crucial to making sure that you're going to meet the margin you set out for that project. If the schedule flies so far off, and I'm going to use builder trend terms here, like if you have a lot of customer variances and builder variances, then that can throw a schedule off completely. And you need to make sure that you're still profitable in that when those variances come up. But you need to understand, I need to make sure that this happens so that way when it's time for this to happen, it can happen. And if I need to put more men on this phase of the job, then let me do that so that way we can get it done and be ready for the next phase. So, it's amazing too. Sometimes a lot of these guys are not really good schedulers.
It's interesting you bring that up. So, it's funny I think a lot of us, become more seasoned in business, right? I feel that way now, especially as I have one thing I love about the podcast, Tim, is to bring guests such as yourself that are like super educated, knowledgeable, that like make us better business owners. And being fortunate to network with you, like these are things I understand even more today. When I started my company 10 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't understand, or I should say, I don't understand. I did at the time, the value of estimating, right? How crucial, because as you mentioned, it's not just creating an expectation that's realistic for the client and for the budget and the end goal, but it's also being able to hire the right trade partners and subcontractors and suppliers that can perform, meet our timelines, right? There's so much that goes into this, understanding the numbers so that I can use that database and I can track it for the next one. And as you mentioned, when you start getting into scheduling, to understand again, nothing's clean in construction. What I mean is it's not like I start January 1 and then I'm done December 31st. It doesn't happen. I have
Correct.
jobs that are 6 months, 14 months, 28 months, 36 months. So when you're carrying these costs through year to year, you have to really understand and this goes back to me getting a conversation. I have to understand what the goal of percentage was so I can, and have a database and have estimating and understand that manpower so that when I have a coordinator and a superintendent and a laborer and a project manager that are overseeing this project and they're billing hourly, and I do cost plus just to be open. So, I mean, I'm
Okay.
doing cost plus, I'm tracking
Yep.
this, I'm doing time cards, but at least I can sit in front of a client in the estimating process and say, I'm pretty confident that my supervision labor for your project is going to be X because here's my data. I've been tracking it. And then,
Mm-hmm.
so over the term, I have a really good idea of what my net profit is. The owner knows how I'm paid. And I don't know how I didn't operate like this in the beginning, but it just takes time, right? Because I
Yeah.
made some of these mistakes you're speaking of where I would hire for someone. I'm like, oh yeah, you're going to pay him 100 grand. Perfect. I got this new job. We're going to do great. And then you're like, why am I not making money?
That's the question that most contractors have. Why am I not making money?
So maybe it goes to this because I know one thing you're big on is KPIs. And so,
Yeah.
key performance indicators,
Hmm.
when you think about the financial, maybe you don't get in the weeds, but what are key performance indicators, KPIs? Why should contractors have KPIs that work for their company and how should they use them?
Yeah. KPIs are very important. I mean, sometimes they save you legally, and then sometimes, I mean, they're
What do you
just
mean
gonna
by
help
that
you.
legally? I'm curious, real quick, if I interrupt you.
Yeah. So like one thing is like trainings. When we're talking about safety trainings, those type of things, and if you got, signed documents, how many people have taken the training, how many people have completed the training, who has not completed the training, those type of things can come up to bite you later if there's ever a workers' comp claim, and there's a lawsuit that follows that. Um, I've seen that so many times, just with my father, and then also with some of the companies I work with. So having documented trainings is is so important, and monitoring that, who has completed and who hasn't. And so that's one piece. The other piece is, find I would say, like, even bidding, I would track who I have won a bid with and what was my profit margin with that person. And with doing that, you're going to start to find some common things. This person has an appetite for 40% margins versus, person client number two may only have an appetite for 20% margins. So you can start, if you start to track that data, and then if they both come to the table again to you for repeat business, you may want to, you know, number one, you may want to go with client one versus client two. The other piece is too is you now know how to bid this project with client one versus client two. Don't give client two, show them 40% margins, which could, the markups could be anything. I don't know what the markups would be to get you that 40%, but because they may not have an appetite, you may be going back and forth with them around it. But it also can help you too if you don't have any projects lined up, and then you need that project, and long as that 20% or 25% margin still gets you some margin to help you take care of operating costs, then I can still bid that project as so and take it on, knowing that the margin going to be lower, but I'm still going to make a profit, and I'm still going to keep my guys, working and keep business moving. So those are some KPIs I like to kind of look at, and then also from just a sure financial standpoint, just are we meeting the desired operating profit margin, month to month. So if we're not, then we kind of know what the quarter is going to end up. So we should already kind of know what's getting ready to happen, and we can start to plan for that, and we can start to maybe take on saying, hey, you may be putting out a lot of bids at 40%. We may need to dial that down, you know, to 35%, 30%, so we can get some jobs on the books, so we can still meet a portion of that profit margin that we're looking for. And then we'll maybe able to, because it is sometimes things are just seasonal, or it's just for whatever reason, a certain time of the year that things are just not happening for you. But you still need to make sure that certain KPIs are being monitored, and then are healthy as well.
I love that you broke that down that way. What's interesting is you actually led off with the safety aspect of liability when I asked you about that, and that's really interesting. The safety side for the KPI, the bidding is really important. And the point you made that I do want to touch on is, I know some of the bigger companies, they have a goal. They really track this information, as you mentioned, Timothy, where they say, okay, if I'm bidding, because some of them maybe aren't negotiated work, and so they're bidding in the market, but if they're bidding, let's say 10 million a month, they
Mm-hmm.
may contract 3 million. So they may have a goal over the year to say, we're going to do 36 million a year. So that means I need to bid, essentially 120 million, which is going to turn into 3 million a month, 12 months, right? Then I'm at
Mm-hmm.
36, and then we keep operating. And so that's one way to do it. Or as you mentioned, you said, hey, if you really understand your numbers, and ideally, if you're trying to hit 40%, but at the same time, it's not like every job that's going to come across your plate will be 40%. So you may have to, just keep that float going, keep the flow going. And so you may have to do a job at 20%, but at least if you understand your numbers and margin, and you have these KPIs, which I can tell you on early in my career, I did not. And I'm just being open here. When you
I
said,
love it.
Brad, you have to have a month to month understanding of your profit margin per job. I
Mhm.
wasn't doing that. I do that now, right?
Yeah.
And we have our KPIs, and we're tracking this. And this is something that my control and I've really worked on,
Hmm.
because it really, why didn't I do this before? I don't know, but I can tell you that anyone listening, if you are doing month to month KPIs, tracking your profit margin per job, and again, as you mentioned early in the conversation, understanding the overall company goal, it's going to
Hmm.
really help you track financially, to be healthy as a company.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. Um, that's very important, Brad. I'm just glad that you're being honest with these guys because you know, AFT, you guys do great work, and I know a lot of guys look up to you. And so for them to understand that, hey, Brad's, he was in the same position that I was in at one point,
Right.
and wasn't doing these things until he got some education, maybe from his accountant or whoever it was who he looked up to, or who mentored him. And they just need to understand that they you had to reach out for help, Brad. I'm sure it didn't just fall in your lap. You had to say something's going wrong, and I need some help. This is not an area of strength, so let me go out and find someone who can help me.
Well, where have you been all my life? This would have been a lot better 10 years ago, Timothy. I could have saved like a lot of issues and pitfalls early in my career if you would have got a hold of me sooner. Um, Let me ask you this one thing that I think is a challenge for all of us. I just before we got on this call, I do a leadership meeting with my leadership team, and it's
Mhm,
been hugely valuable, right? To just understand there's a lot of things on the day to day that they bring up, and we're trying to, it's like every day as a company, we're trying to better everything from the field to the office to the organization communication, and it's just little things that they come up. Oh, we need to fix that. Okay, let's try this. How can a company better organize the field to the back office, because it can still be chaotic, especially financially. Change orders, someone's in the field trying to get the job done, and they're just making decisions. And then now accounting's like, what? Like,
mhm.
where's the change order? Who approved this? Like, who? And so, how can companies better organize that aspect?
Brad, great question. This is a must for every construction company out there. You need a project management system. That's the only way to get ahead. That's the only way to keep your head attached to your body, is to get a project management system. I've worked with, Builder Trend, Heavy Job, Procore, so those are some of the systems that I've worked with in the past and some of my systems I still work with. But you got to have that. Even for me as an accountant, I have a project management system, and it's called Carbon. And that's how I manage all the clients that I take on, because it's impossible for me to remember all the fine details that need to happen with a specific client if I don't have a project management system where I've documented that information. And I gotta have that where it's clean communication between me and the client. It's all organized in one spot, and that's what a project management system does for a construction company. Now the office can talk with the field, and they both understand what's happening. And then also, if you're serving a client, the client understand what's happening. And so if you train your staff and the clients to communicate and talk to you through the project management system, nothing is lost. No communication is dropped. And everything flows so much more smoother. And I just can't stress it enough. You got to get you a PM system.
So I would imagine, especially as you're doing these diagnostics and meeting with these companies and consulting, you already alluded that when you're interviewing them, none of them understand the burden rate, which is totally understandable. That's
Mm-hmm.
why they're coming to you and they're working on this. What you're speaking to is really understanding, systems. As companies, we have to have systems, processes. They have to be documented. Project management software is huge to help us do that and
Mm-hmm.
correct that. What as you look at all the companies that you work with, how does that work from top to bottom? And what I mean by that is a company that really understands KPIs or is really tracking job costing. Is it usually reflective in the field that they typically have systems and organization, project management that mirror that? And so that's a good example to show you that, hey, this company knows what they're doing, because if I know they understand the money side, I know they understand the operations and field side.
It starts top down. So whoever the contractor is, they have to buy in and say, this is what we need to do, and what we're going to do. And I know we may be old school in certain things, but we got to come to the 21st century. We got to understand that technology needs to be infused into our construction company. And that's the only way that we're going to get ahead. That's the only way we're going to get a leg up. I remember when I started small, one man show, the only way I had a leg up is because I had better technology than the other accountants, and because I was able to serve them more efficiently. So that's where you got to have. So when I see these construction companies that have the project management systems, even if it's not working perfectly, you're not using every part of it, but you still, you're fighting through it. That's a good sign of a good client, and someone who's going to be able to make the jump or make the leap, and grow their company very, very easily. The ones who are abrasive to the thought of um, bringing on a PM system, and who say, well, I've been doing it this way. I have my Excel spreadsheet formulas that I didn't figured out, over 20 years. Trust me, that Excel spreadsheet cannot be compared to the project management systems that they have out today. And so if you got a good implementer and someone who can help you walk through it, which is kind of what we do. We are a very family oriented company where we hold the hands of our construction owners, and say, hey, we will help you understand this part. I got Loom videos galore of how of how many times I've had to explain a process or give them some training, something like that. It's just being open-minded to the idea of, this is what I need to grow my company, and I'm just going to fight through it, and I'm going to make it sure that this company can run without me. The company cannot run without you if you don't have the right systems in place. Period.
So along that line, I mean, essentially you're kind of alluding to this, but what can contractors do today to fix that profit margin?
To fix that profit margin, the first thing you need to do is get a baseline of where you are today. Because without having that, it's nothing to fix. We don't know what to fix. The other thing is So start taking a look at some of your old projects. If you have some data on your old projects, is start to look at that and see how much did I mark that labor up, that equipment cost, that subcontractor cost, that you know material cost for that particular job, and then look at what margin did it yield, and let's see, was that something that was done consistently? Were we yielding you know um, similar margins? And so understanding that data will help you now bid the next project better. And this is something that gets better over time. Estimating is an art. It gets better over time, but you have to have somewhere to start, and you got to have a baseline. And so those are things that I highly recommend that anyone who's looking to make a change in their business today is to review that data, go to some of those old projects, see what the margins were, get your books clean so you can see where your baseline is for the company today, and that way and start to keep track of those things now, because now that you have good data, you can make changes month to month, and you can make the right changes with confidence.
It's interesting. I love that you brought that because essentially it's understanding, okay, data, though projects is huge for the future, how we understand that, and then we can use that, and then really understand our baseline today. Um, as you look at the companies that are successful that you've been working with in consulting, are you seeing what are they doing different? Right? You mentioned systems as part of that. Is there anything else that they're doing different, which is leading to that success?
They they're diving in head first into systems. I mean, that's the big thing. And then their mindset is, I gotta do things different. So mindset is another huge shift. Then they're also getting help. They're not letting themselves be the only one doing everything. It's saying, hey, I don't do marketing well. Let's work with a copywriter. Let's work with someone to get with my website and clean up my logo, clean up all this other stuff, and handle that. Let me get an email address that has my domain, on the back of it, instead of the Gmail or Yahoo or Hotmail, those type of things. Um, it's just saying that, hey, I'm not great at everything about my business. So I want to focus on working in the areas that I have to work in today just to get it done. But things that I can outsource, let me outsource it. Things that I can hire, let me, hire for that. And just start to build a team. That's the best thing that you can do, is just start to build a team. If you've been around for 20 years, you're in position to
Yeah,
build a
I would
team.
agree. One thing that when you speak about that, under, and I had a guest on, I'm trying to remember, it had to have been maybe a year ago. And he said that if someone could perform at 60% of your capacity, you should sub that out. And I was like, it's
Yeah.
pretty tough because, as an entrepreneur, business owner, too many of us want to handle everything and micromanage and be involved. But essentially hiring qualified people that can take that
Yeah.
off and finding the right experts. It's just going to, that growth will happen. But something that really comes into play, and essentially this is the whole context of the conversation here, is understand the budget, because you have to understand your margins. So I know when I can hire a marketing person or a salesperson, or I can add to the estimating department, or
Hmm.
add to the field, or to the accounting department. Additionally, as you think about, hiring, you mentioned that companies should have savings to hire, which probably most people have never thought about that. When should a company understand
Hmm.
when's the right time to hire?
The right time to hire is when you can afford to pay that person's salary for a year, because you really got to give, even if they're a seasoned individual, they're skilled, they still have to come in and adjust to your company culture. They still have to adjust to the systems that you have in place. There's a lot that needs to happen for them to even show you that they're going to be, a huge value to the company, or start to actually bring you extra revenue into the company. And so if you're not prepared to pay them for a year, then that's probably a big yellow, yield caution sign that says, "Oh, we may can't afford this right now." And so I like to have a year's worth of salary in the bank for that person. So that way I know that I gave them a fair shot at being successful in my
It's
company.
interesting because essentially what you're breaking down is that with a year, we all understand that there's going to be time for them to ramp up, to understand, to be trained, to perform. And then they may have qualifications, they may be highly skilled, but as you mentioned, there's company culture, adaptation, training of software, how we do things as a company. So there has to be at least a runway there that they can build to over the next 12 months.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Otherwise, you're just setting them up for failure. And then you may be, you may make a decision to get rid of them for whatever reason. And then you may have lost a really good person, who would have been great for your team. They just didn't have the time um, allotted to them to perform in a way that you were expecting.
What is the cost to replace? I'm going to ask you that because I mean, maybe not the actual cost, but you mentioned that maybe too many of us kick them off the pier and say sink or swim, right? And we don't have process, we don't have training, we don't have
Hmm.
systems, we don't have a landing zone, we don't set expectations for them, just like anybody, right? For any relationship to be successful, what
Hmm.
is the cost for a company that has to continue to hire and train?
That is so expensive. And let me tell you how expensive it is. It's sometimes 2 to 3 times their salary. And what I mean by that is what you have paid them up to that point when you have let them go. You may have to pay that again 2 or 3 times. Because again, we're talking about the ramp up, the training, the time that's being spent. All that stuff is costing the company and it's sucking you dry because who's doing the training? Who's doing, the hiring? Who's doing the mentoring? All those things that's costing the company something, even if it's something that's intangible that you can't see with your eyes. But the fact that I'm the owner or I have someone who's close to me as an admin or whomever who's doing training and mentoring and just building this person up and getting them ready to be valuable to the company, that's money being spent every day
I
all
love that you
week.
shared that it could be 2, 3 times the salary. And I will actually completely agree with that. And the reason being is that you think about, for someone to onboard the training, right? So I'm taking people who are already have jobs and responsibilities, they're training. And if that person leaves or doesn't pan out and we got to hire again, now they're training, you essentially could have multiple people doing training that aren't performing in their normal duties, right? And then you're trying to get someone up to speed. And so
Yeah,
you're now exhausting, you know, the overhead of many, many people in the company.
absolutely. Absolutely. So hire slow, fire fast, but definitely put together a nice training program to onboard a new employee so that way they can, really be successful at your company. And then over communicate the scorecard to them. Their employee scorecard needs to be over communicated. This is how you win here at my company. We look at these 5 things, these 10 things. If you're executing these well, you're going to be doing perfect.
Okay, I need to do this now. If I
And
interrupt this, so what's funny about I've heard hire slow, fire fast, right? I've heard
yeah.
for people to really have good company culture and have be real successful. And I've said it before on the podcast is you knew they have to have
Mhm.
two things: they have to believe in the brand or the company or the product, or they have to understand their scope. They have to understand. But what's interesting is you broke that down even further. It's one thing to understand expectations, but you said over communicate scorecard, and I think that's really
Yeah.
understanding. I mean, that's very understandable for me and anyone listening is that if they have a scorecard of 5 to 10 things that I need them to do, like, and that I'm tracking them
Hmm.
and I laid that out for them, there's no reason they can't come in and at least, they're going to build on that, but at least they have a core, training system and core expectation that they can work on.
Absolutely. And they're going to give them so much more confidence. They're going to be excited because they may look at those things and say, "Oh, I'm going to nail it. I'm going to kill it." You know, and to know exactly what I'm being graded on. I mean, what's the worst? than going into a class and being tested on something that you've never seen in your life. And you don't even like, hold on, you're gonna test me on this, and I had why you didn't prepare me. And so this is what that scorecard does. It prepares them for the test. And I hope, these companies are also doing performance evaluations, because you find a lot of companies who take a back seat to that because it's just a lot of work. It's the mentor, but that's our position as owners of the company. We need to be mentoring those who we are onboarding, and constantly coaching and mentoring and understanding and giving them feedback, and allow them to give us feedback of how well we are coaching and mentoring them, and how well they are meeting or exceeding the
So, how
standards.
often are your customers paying attention? Because you mentioned the cost, the opportunity cost, the dollar cost of acquisition of good people, good talent. How does that play a role when we think about
Mhm.
customer acquisition? Right, as we're looking for uh, chasing the right customer, the right lead, the amount of time. How important is that for people to understand the cost to attract a client, to secure a client, to market to a client?
That's so very important, because number one, you need to get clear on who your client is, and that needs to be a clear thing. Like for me, it's very clear who my client is. I'm a construction accountant. So my clients are in the construction industry. If you are a plumber, do you do commercial plumbing? Do you only do rough plumbing? Do you do, you know, sorry, finished plumbing? If you're an electrical contractor, are you what type of do you do residential, commercial? You need that message needs to be clear. So I recommend that everybody spend a lot of time getting with the copywriter. I don't write my stuff. I have a copywriter who's written all my stuff. We talked and conversed about it, but they made sure that who I'm targeting, my website speaks to them. My business card speaks to them. My brand, speaks to them. Like everything that I'm saying speaks to them. And so spending the right money up front with the right person in the right order, because some people want to go out and do Google Ads before they got a copywriter, or go out and get Google Ads done before they get a website. You know, you can't do these things out of order. There's an order to this thing if you want to save money. So um, that's important, and understanding where I need to be spending my money today, so that way it can gain me, more revenue tomorrow. And I hope
Yeah,
I'm answering your
100%.
question, Brad.
No, you are. Let me ask. So your dad's a
Yeah,
contractor. Of course, he may say, "Tim, I
yeah.
want you to take over the family business." You're like, "No way. I'm going to consulting financial." Maybe not. What led to the direction you're in today?
It's funny. The role went a little different. First graduated college, went in banking for a year, left banking, came to my grandmother's nonprofit organization, was the CEO and CFO of that organization for 6 years. Went through about 9 different lawsuits. Went through a lot of different things, and we had 3 locations, 37 employees. Everybody was able to be my mom and aunt, and who worked for me. And so I had to learn a lot of things very, very quickly, and quickly learned that, okay, nonprofit is not for me. Needed to move in for profit arena. Understood that I had a certain skill set that I could bring, to an industry, which was the accounting industry. And then the accounting industry was very wide open for me. I didn't niche down right away. But then as I got into the industry, I realized I needed to niche down, because it got very, very confusing and very hard to serve every industry very, very well. And so what was the low hanging fruit for me? It was construction, because my dad, I've been around that for all of my life. And so he's been licensed since 1984. And so who better to mentor me of, what my client will want, and what do they need, and some of the pitfalls that they may have fallen into or may getting ready to fall into, and those type of things. So I just had that direct mentorship from him on, and I just got better and better at serving the construction industry because of the mentorship from my dad.
That's
So
interesting.
that's
I
what
was
got
going to
me
ask
here.
if you felt like you had a unique advantage, especially if you built your business, just having the background in construction that you did.
I did because I mean, I think anyone can dive into this thing and learn it. It's just it may be a little tough, but you gotta absorb everything construction. All of my podcasts are construction podcasts. I'm listening to construction podcasts. I'm reading construction books. I'm understanding, I'm reading the construction audit manual for the IRS. I'm just doing a lot of different things to help, just strengthen my skill set in this industry so I can serve the client well. And so you just gotta dive face deep in it, and you can do it. You can do it. So hopefully that encourage any other
It's
accountant out there
amazing. So,
listening.
how's your business grown? I mean, you personally, of course, you've helped all those you consult grow their business and be more profitable and understand the business
Yeah.
internally. How's that look for you?
It's been looking great. I've been able to bring on employees. I'm 100% virtual, and so that was another thing that was unique about me is I didn't want to have the traditional, walk up office. I said 'cause I want to serve construction all across the country, and I believe I could do that with the right systems in place. And so, because I've had the right systems in place and those type of things, I've gotten opportunities like to serve on into its tax council. I sat on there for 3 years. I'm doing my fourth year there. So got a chance to, you know, meet with their leadership team, got a chance to meet with the CEO of Intuit and have lunch with him. And, so a lot of things have opened up for me because I just been consistent in my pursuit of just excellence and, what I'm doing for the
So
industry. That's
let
it.
me ask you this, because what's interesting is you mentioned you kind of had to figure out your niche, right? Your niche as a accountant. And so of course, construction industry, because you
Mhm.
understand the difference of construction accounting and you've had a great mentor in your father. Um, Even then, I mean, construction's wide open. You have commercial and residential and production and spec builders and cost plus and subcontractors and trade partner. How has that focus changed? Do you work with all of them? Have you tried to dial in or target a certain aspect of the construction accounting industry?
Yeah, so most of my guys are either doing high end spec homes or they're doing commercial jobs. And a lot of the ones who are doing the commercial jobs, they're more likely the subs because the subs are the guys who are very busy, have a usually have a huge labor force, and they just need a lot of help, you know. And so those are some of the guys that I'm working with on the commercial side, and then I have some site prep guys as well. And so, but residential, either high end remodelers or high end, spec home builders, um, seem to be a best fit for
That's
me.
amazing. So let me ask you this: what do you do for fun?
Oh,
What?
golf. I actually played
Good for
today.
you. How's the handicap?
uh, I'm a weekend golfer, so you know, I'm gonna say my score is gonna average around high 80s,
Yeah,
low
it's awesome.
90s. So that
But
that
but
that'll be
but when you get
yeah,
to
that'll
that
be
point,
me.
like it's fun. Like golf is really fun. That it is because like you
Yeah,
can
it is.
actually you control most of your shots, and at least you're in play. You're not losing a ball every
Yeah.
hole at that point.
No, I'm not losing the ball every hole. I can play
With one
around the golf
ball.
with one ball. So that's good.
That's a huge thing, isn't it? Funny you think about that for anyone that golfs. You're like, I just made it through the round and I played the same ball. That's a huge win.
Same ball.
That's
And I
awesome.
marked
So
it.
so golf's fun. What else? What else do you do?
Yeah,
Yeah.
golf, basketball. I'm a
Wow.
pianist, so yeah, so I've been playing the piano since I was 7, so it's just something that's always been a part of me. And yeah, so those are the main things that I do for fun, and playing, a ton of sports with my kids. I got 3 boys, so they're very, very active, and all of them are into sports. One of them is in the music, which is
Yeah.
fun, so I get to enjoy that. And those are my fun times. And then definitely, spending time with the wifey and, having our time alone away from the boys. That's always great. And so we'll actually be in Scottsdale. Um,
Well, let
April.
me know. You need to
In
email me
April.
because hopefully our schedules can align. We could get together. So
Oh, that'd be great. Great. 'Cause I heard Scottsdale has some
there
great
is
golf
some good.
courses. So I gotta try to see.
Yep, there's some great courses, and fortunately in April it's still nice. The July maybe not so much, but it's still a good time to come out here and play. So it's a
Oh,
little too
okay.
hot in the summer.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that sounds good. We know how to
yeah,
get by. Come on now. We used to the
yeah,
warm weather.
exactly. Well, Timothy, I can't thank you enough. You've been amazing. So for those listening, those who are looking at getting their business on track, understand how to make profit, get job costing, no better than going to the expert. Where can they find you?
They can find me at constructionfinancialblueprint.com. Constructionfinancialblueprint.com. Um, it's a blueprint is where I do most of the work. I call it a financial blueprint. That's when I dive in deep into your business and your organization and find out how we can help you. So it's like, going to the doctor and getting a CAT scan.
Yep. Getting the full CAT scan, the MRI, and then figuring out the full diagnostics so you can
Yeah,
get them back on track.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
any other social media, other handles, LinkedIn, anywhere else they can find you?
Yeah, I'm definitely on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'll say me personally, I'm active on LinkedIn. And then you'll see, some stuff being posted on Instagram from us, Facebook as well. That's pretty much it. We're not really on the TikTok and those type of things, but LinkedIn. Oh, my YouTube page. Go definitely can check that out. So at G plus F. YouTube has a thing that you
Yep.
put the at sign now. So yeah, at G plus F. You can find my YouTube channel and you can see some videos that we put out. We put a lot of information up on like, what we do, how we do it, that type of thing. And, we got some fun stuff on there too. So
Well, Timothy, you've been amazing. Can't thank you enough for sharing your wisdom today and really appreciate you coming on.
Brad, thank you for having me on. I was so excited to be here and I'm happy. I can't wait till it airs.
Same here. So thanks again, Timothy.
Yeah.
If you get value from the show, please support us by giving a 5-star rating and review on whatever platform you listen to. And I also have a favor to ask. We've had some incredible guests that come on and share their wisdom, their knowledge about their business. So if you have friends or family members that could benefit from those episodes, please share it with them, as well as any other business owners that you're networking with that could get value from the podcast or certain episodes. Please share those as well. Again, subscribe, make sure you're following any questions that you have, topics. We've had listeners reach out about certain guests that we should have on the show. Again, brad.l@aftconstruction.com. Email me for topics to address, guests that we should have on, and even if you think you'd be a great guest for the show. So, again, thank you for all your support, and we'll see you next time.